New Zealand sits at the edge of the world, and its isolation is a huge part of what makes it so breathtaking. Its dramatic landscapes and clean environment are matched only by how far it is from everything else. The country often gets left off world maps, and only about 5.3 million people live there. Those who do enjoy strong public services, solid education, dependable government, good healthcare access, and a culture that generally values fairness. It all sounds like the perfect postcard, but those same strengths have created some unexpected challenges for its economy, one that was already unusual from the start. The surprising trend is that many New Zealanders are walking away from what outsiders would call paradise. Despite the small population, the country has one of the world's highest emigration rates. Most of the people leaving are hopping across the Tasman Sea to Australia. Over 10% of all New Zealand-born people now live there. And this isn't a minor trend. The per capita outflow is similar to countries facing serious conflict or instability. The obvious question is why? And to make things more concerning, those leaving are typically young workers at the beginning of their careers. The group countries usually rely on most. While the population is still rising overall, that growth is almost entirely because of new immigrants stepping into the roles locals are leaving behind. That creates a separate set of issues, making the original problem even harder to manage. On the flip side, another demographic is rushing into New Zealand, older, wealthier Australians, and they're influencing the marketplace in their own way. So what makes New Zealand's economy so distinct? What pressures are pushing so many citizens to leave? And why has it been so difficult to stop the trend? To start, the economy is shaped by its small scale and its distance from the rest of the world. The entire population is roughly equal to that of Sydney alone, and even Australia isn't known for having a massive population to begin with. This size cuts both ways. The drawback is that large international industries rarely choose to set up there, because operating in New Zealand costs more and scales less efficiently than doing the same thing closer to Asia's shipping routes. This applies to more than manufacturing. Even financial services prefer hubs like Singapore. It's closer to major markets and far more connected to the global financial system. And if companies want a regional base that still feels Western, Sydney offers a larger market, a more recognized currency, and nearly identical legal frameworks to New Zealand. This extremely close relationship between the two countries is important, and you'll see why as we go on. But the key point is that New Zealand only hosts industries that have no choice but to operate there. Tourism, local banking, domestic services, and some maritime activity all play meaningful roles. And because the population is small, the demand for massive, varied industries simply isn't there. One sector, however, stands apart: agriculture. For a wealthy country, New Zealand is extraordinarily productive in farming. That's rare. Its fertile soil, plentiful water, and modern techniques help it produce high-value food exports that are in demand, especially across Asia. But despite agriculture's importance, well-educated urban New Zealanders aren't exactly rushing to work on farms. And in reality, there aren't many farming jobs to begin with. Land is so valuable that farms tend to be highly automated, using top-tier equipment to maximize output with minimal labor. Which brings us to New Zealand's biggest economic force by far: housing. Buying, renting, constructing, financing, and regulating homes accounts for around half of the entire economy. And concentrating so much economic activity around property has created major side effects. The most obvious is that homes have become wildly expensive. For a country with a small population and lots of open space, New Zealand consistently ranks among the least affordable places to buy a house. The government did try to cool the market by preventing most foreign buyers from purchasing property. In theory, fewer outside buyers should reduce demand and lower prices. But the change barely moved the needle. Before the ban, overseas buyers represented only about 3% of purchases, and Australians were exempt anyway because of the close relationship between the two countries. Wealthy Australians often buy holiday homes in New Zealand, places like Queenstown and Auckland, drawn by the scenery and the relative stability. For them, New Zealand real estate is often cheaper than Australia's biggest cities, and it comes without Australia's hefty stamp duty fees. Most demand still comes from New Zealanders, but prices have dipped slightly recently due to tax changes that made property investments less attractive. Even so, affordability remains a major issue, worse than in many comparable countries. You might assume that high prices are the main reason young New Zealanders leave, but that doesn't fully explain the situation. Many of them move to Australia, where housing is also extremely expensive. Clearly, they're chasing something else. What they really want is opportunity. Because only industries that must be in New Zealand operate there, job options are limited. If you're not in agriculture or tied to the housing sector, the career paths can feel narrow. Larger Australian cities simply offer more choices. Specialized fields, like scientific research, fine arts, advanced engineering, or high-level management, tend to cluster in big economic centers, and New Zealand doesn't have cities large enough to support most of these fields at scale. The unusual thing here is that those larger centers exist just across a short stretch of ocean, and they belong to another country. This kind of brain drain isn't unheard of, but it usually affects developing nations, not high-income ones like New Zealand. The open movement agreements with Australia make it extremely easy for Kiwis to move. It's almost like the European Union in practice. Citizens of both countries can live, work, and buy homes in the other with very few restrictions. That freedom lowers the barrier so much that leaving becomes a simple decision. Education opportunities also draw many New Zealanders across the Tasman. Australian universities are larger and more plentiful, and New Zealand citizens receive similar treatment to locals when it comes to tuition and student loans. To illustrate, when the narrator's partner attended medical school, nearly half the students were from New Zealand simply because more training spots exist in Australia. Culturally, the two countries are nearly identical, both English-speaking, similar humor, similar lifestyles, and minimal cultural friction. Economists don't talk about it much, but the reality is that a New Zealander in Australia doesn't face the same social resistance migrants from other regions often encounter. That makes moving even easier. All of this means the main reason New Zealand loses so many young adults is that relocating to Australia requires almost no effort, and the opportunities are simply broader. Unfortunately, undoing this trend will be extremely challenging. Right now, nearly 600,000 people born in New Zealand live in Australia, more than 1 in 10. Meanwhile, only around 90,000 Australians have moved the other direction, and most of them are older retirees with little impact on the workforce. To replace departing young professionals, New Zealand relies heavily on immigrants, mostly from large Asian population centers. However, even this hasn't fixed the problem. A notable number of those immigrants eventually move on to Australia as well. New Zealand has become known as a side door into major Australian cities because getting visas and residency in New Zealand is easier. Once someone becomes a resident or citizen there, they can freely enter Australia. And for first-generation residents who didn't grow up in New Zealand, the emotional ties aren't as strong, making the decision to leave that much easier. This dynamic has led to a perception that New Zealand is turning into an expensive retreat for wealthy Australians and older Kiwis, while the workforce cycles through people waiting for their chance to head to Australia. So why not tighten the arrangement between the two countries? That would be extremely difficult. Politically, a huge share of New Zealand's citizens live in Australia and would oppose any policy that affects their mobility. And most New Zealanders value the freedom to move back and forth, even if it hurts the national labor pool. From a geopolitical perspective, the relationship between the two countries is one of the closest in the world. Any restrictive move would be complicated. Economically, even though New Zealand loses many workers, it also benefits when they return later with new skills and larger savings. Many do eventually return home, bringing money and experience that boost the local economy. The real challenge is finding ways to keep the country attractive for young workers in the first place. Improving job opportunities and addressing housing affordability are major tasks, but New Zealand does have advantages. Its national debt levels are manageable, giving the government room to implement major reforms if needed. And above all, the country's natural appeal matters. Safety, stability, cleanliness, and beauty draw people in more than most economic incentives can. Those traits are valuable, and they keep people coming. Even in Australia, the very place pulling so many Kiwis away, much of the country's appeal relies on similar intangible qualities. Thanks for watching, mate. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next one.